From Relay FM, this is Connected, episode number 67. Today's show is brought to you by Braintree, Fracture, and Squarespace. My name is Myke Hurley, and I'm joined by Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hello, Myke.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Myke. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Stephen Hackett is out on assignment this week, so it's just me and you.
He's reporting on the field for car sharing services.
Yes. Yeah,
that's
he
what
is
he's doing.
So this starts one of those horrific things where now me and you have to do the follow-up, which is, it just never goes well.
I will hold your hand, Myke.
We're
we're in this together. We can do this.
It's all I ever want, really. As long as we're in this stuff together, I'm happy.
So let me start, Myke.
Okay, please.
So last week we were talking about the pro apps on the App Store and developers building apps for professionals and selling them, not at $2, but maybe at a higher price, and trying to make a pro business on the iOS App Store. Well, I got an interesting email from Tim Shaitan. He works for GTI Predictive, and this company, this is quite difficult for me to explain because they do crazy stuff. But basically what they do is they created an entire division of their company to replace industrial instruments and other tools with iPad software. So they make apps like a vibration analysis app called Vibe Pro, or a machine shop balancer, or a thermal imaging app. They make thermal growth adjustment for shaft alignment. I don't even know what it means, but it sounds awesome. I mean, science, right? And these apps are not sold at your typical App Store price. For example, Face Pro, which is a face analysis app, it's $200 on the App Store.
I just wanted to just point out it's phase, right? Not because it sounded like you said face, which is kind of funny. It just analyzes faces and gives you a rating out of 10.
It's phase. I don't know what a phase in industrial whatever is, but still. Vibe RMS, machine certification, $200. And they have built a very profitable business with this kind of very specific, very niche, but, advanced iPad software. And it was very kind to send us an email with all the links and the details of these apps. And, this is one of the many examples that I had in mind. A company trying to find a market segment, a very specific one. And once you find your audience, once you find your market, and you make a software that becomes irreplaceable for people or for other companies, they're going to give you a lot of money. If people find the kind of tool that they need, not just that they like, because this is not about, personal preference. This is about getting work done. So once a company or once an individual or a small team, it doesn't matter. Once people find what they need, they're going to give you money.
Yeah, the market is there. You just need to find it. The market might not be huge, and in those instances, you just charge a ton of money.
Yeah, exactly, because it's the kind of advanced software that requires a very high investment beforehand, and you're allowed basically by the market to charge this kind of money afterwards. So thank you, Tim, for the follow up, and it's such a great example. If you I don't know, if you run a factory, maybe you should check out the apps on the App Store, or if you're Dr. Drang or someone like him, maybe you will need these apps. I don't know. They look awesome to me because I don't understand what's going on in there. So it looks like
they look awesome in a non-usual awesome kind of way, right?
Yes.
Because they kind of look like hell to me, right? Yes, it's just all this stuff, and I'm like, I don't know what you do, but that's the kind of awesomeness about it. Because I look at it and I'm like, I can see that this thing exists, but I don't know what any of it means.
What's the German word for being fascinated by something you're really afraid of?
There must be one.
There's going to be one.
Is it chapter markers? I'm not sure.
No. So, Myke, tell us about the other items in the follow-up.
So, Lauren wrote in, and we were talking last week about there kind of being an Apple app or like a banner app for the iPad Pro, right? Like the big thing, like GarageBand or something like that. And Lauren wrote in to say, it seemed obvious to me at the announcement that the banner apps for the iPad Pro are Adobe Comp, Adobe Photoshop Fix, Office, Procreate, and the Anatomy program that nobody will ever use, just as Pixelmator was the banner app for iPad Air 2. I completely agree with this, right? They brought those developers onto the stage, and they were showing what these apps could do. And additionally, you know, they gave kind of early access to people like 53. And this definitely underscores the point that I think I was making last week about, like, you know, that there are apps, they're just not Apple apps. But I think that this further shows the change that Apple are going through with these things. They used to be the company that made this stuff, but now they're kind of outsourcing it. And, you know, I just don't know if that is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. Like, should Apple be kind of setting the pace and showing what should be done on these things, or should they be working with third parties to create different experiences? I don't know what the right answer is, but I think it would be nice to see a mix of both, personally, because there is kind of like I think there is like a perception thing that if Apple is doing something, then they believe that it's worth it, right? They're putting their money where their mouth is. But I do think it's incredibly important that they continue to work with third parties in this way, this more direct way, so there are more choices when these new features and new products come onto the market.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also believe Apple should resume their effort to lead by example. It was great to see Apple make GarageBand or the iWork suite for the iPad a few years ago, and now that they're not. I mean, they're still updating those apps, but they're not making new, paid apps on the App Store anymore. And I feel like they really should, because it kind of sets the tone for other developers to follow and to be inspired by Apple. And I really want to see Apple make, Logic and Final Cut for the iPad Pro. I don't think it's too absurd at this point. We'll see what happens. Again, I have high hopes for next year. iOS 10, WWDC 2016. We'll see what happens, Myke. I gotta talk about car sharing services again. I'm sorry, Michael, but we got follow up. We got follow up to handle, and a lot of people wrote in, including Spanish listener Kikatin. I assume it's the way that you pronounce this. This is we got this piece of feedback many times. There's a similar service in other European countries called Car2Go.
Yeah, and we mentioned this last week. Zipcar as well is one that exists in the US and the UK.
Yeah, and Car2Go seems to be available in other European countries such as Spain, and I'm pretty sure I got feedback from maybe Denmark or Finland. I don't remember.
Sure.
So they use electric smart cars. We use regular gas cars here. Steven also had a question for you in the document that we share, Myke. Does Myke use any car sharing services in London? Because very famously, you don't have a driving license.
Yeah, so I don't use a service like Zipcar or Car2Go, or what was the one that you used?
Enjoy,
because I don't drive. I can't drive. But I do use Uber quite a lot.
Uber. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's so convenient here in London. And there's some stuff going on right now where like the government and the transport authority are trying to restrict Uber.
That's going around everywhere.
Yeah, I signed a petition. Look, I know that Uber is kind of like, there are people at Uber that make it like a terrible company, but it is incredibly useful and the drivers seem really awesome. And everybody that I speak to that is an Uber driver seems to be very happy with being an Uber driver. So I don't know. I mean, I like the service a lot and it's very, very, very useful to me. So.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the politics of Uber because I got a few friends here who have very strong opinions about the taxi organizations and Uber coming over. But I just want to say that from my perspective, from my citizen and user perspective, progress always wins in the end, and that's what people want. So you could force someone to use, an old, antiquated, more expensive system, or you could, open the door to progress. But I believe that always happens in the end anyway. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. So there you go, car sharing services. This is the show that you go to for car sharing news.
Definitely.
Stay tuned to Connected for more car sharing service news in the future.
Oh man, imagine when Apple makes a car. We're gonna go crazy.
See, this is the thing, we're laying the groundwork, man. We're just, we can point back to it. We've been talking about cars for years. This week's episode is brought to you by Braintree, code for easy online payments. If you're a mobile app developer, you should be checking out Braintree. They are the payment solution used by companies like Uber, Airbnb, Hotel Tonight, Living Social, and Munchery. Braintree has made the payment experiences in all of these apps so fantastic. Like I was just talking about Uber, right? We were just talking about it. And it's one of the things I love about Uber is the payment stuff is so simple. Like you just put your information in one time and you're good to go. Like it's just sorted out. Like I've got my card in there. I don't ever have to worry about it. I get great receipts. I've never had a problem like that. I've had stuff refunded to me like super easily. Like this is all part of Braintree. And now you can add similar experiences to your own app as well. With excellent customer service and simple integration, Braintree gets you ready to receive payments quickly. Braintree's continuous support plus fast payouts means you'll be prepared as your company grows from your first dollar to your billionth. Braintree is also helping solve the problem of mobile cart abandonment by offering a best-in-class mobile checkout experience, and they make payment experiences in your favorite apps seamless and magical. Now you can add a similar experience to your own app as well. Braintree has a full-stack payment solution with support for all payment types that your customers might want, including PayPal, Apple Pay, Bitcoin, Venmo, cards, and more with one single integration. As a user, that is so awesome that I can just choose however I want to pay. And my understanding is from looking into this that Braintree is really easy to integrate. Apparently, it's like 10 lines of code to put this in, which kind of seems a bit magical to me. I mean, I guess that's the whole thing about it being seamless and magical. Braintree is with you across all platforms with superior fraud protection, fantastic customer service, and fast payouts. To learn more and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to braintreepayments.com/connected. That's braintreepayments.com/connected for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free. Thank you so much to Braintree for their support of this show. So, Federico, you published a really interesting article the other day about kind of branching out again with your automation. I haven't seen anything automation related from you in a while. It seemed like you'd maybe gotten a little bit comfortable with the setting, like the kind of the setup that you had. So can you kind of paint the picture? Like you were using editorial, right, and workflows, I assume, mainly, but now there seems to have been a bit of a shift in that.
Yes, I started using editorial in August 2013, actually in November 2012, since I got the first beta. And of course, the app came out, 9 months later in the summer of, 2 years ago. And I've been using editorial for all my writing for Mac Stories or, the Mac Stories weekly newsletter ever since. 2 years, I built, dozens and dozens of workflows in the app, and I used it in conjunction with Pythonista, which is another app from the same developer. And eventually, I kind of consolidated all my workflow into editorial. I made workflows for Markdown, for WordPress, for, Mac Stories deals, for basically everything. And I was really, really happy with editorial, and I still think it's an amazing app. Doesn't have anything similar that can get close to its power on iOS. The only problem is, since iOS 9 came out, the first beta in June, I've been wanting to write in Markdown in split view. Basically, I want to use my text editor in split view. I want to use it in full resolution on the iPad Pro. I want to use the new keyboard. I want to use the shortcut bar. I want to have all these new iOS 9 features in the text editor that I use every day, which is my most used app alongside Twitter and RSS maybe. I'm living into my text editor, and it's the single piece of software that powers my entire business, because without a proper setup, I wouldn't be able to write, or I would be really slow, which would be bad, or I would be really annoyed and therefore not inspired, which would also be bad, So I stuck with editorial, on iOS 9, even without split view and iOS 9 features throughout the entire summer. I wrote my entire iOS 9 review in it. But when it was time to get an iPad Pro, and when I was sent the review unit, and when I saw what editorial looked like on the big screen, I was really annoyed. I really couldn't bring myself to use the app in basically upscaled, blown up mode on the iPad Pro.
Like how I feel every day when I have to use Google Docs.
Exactly. So I was wondering, maybe it's time for me to consider alternatives. And for 2 years, my main problem is there are certain tasks that if I don't automate, I'm not leaving editorial. After many years of automating certain, things on my device, such as, creating links or linking to apps, or inserting footnotes into a document. If I don't have those tasks in an automated way, I'm just not gonna do them manually because I'm too lazy or stubborn, or it's just a force of habit.
I have things like that that I have integrated into my system or have decided not to, just because it's like, this is just a little thing, like a little additional thing. And if it's not done easily for me, then I'm not going to do it, because it's not massively important. It's a little detail. But if those little details take 10, 15 minutes every single time, it's like, well, I'm not going to do that. So same as you, like, I mean, not in the same kind of ways, but I've got different things in my workflows and my systems that do things for me, because otherwise they just might get left out.
Yeah, and I know that quite a few people maybe like to half jokingly make fun maybe of the workflows that I have, but I'll tell you, some workflows I may have spent days putting them together, but they make me they allow me to make money, basically, because if I put together a workflow that automates generating links to apps that are on sale, I can have an article with a collection of app deals and discounts, and I make money because those are affiliate links. Or if I have a workflow that lets me put together screenshots or a collection of links very easily, I can save time to do something else, which means more traffic to the website. So I try to keep a very practical approach here. I need to be able to get work done. I need to be able to pay the rent at the end of each month. What can I do to speed up, to make my core task easier, faster, or more efficient? So when I was considering moving from editorial, my main question was, can I replicate some key features anywhere else?
So I just want to stop about the moving from editorial thing, because I know that kind of your frustrations were that maybe the app isn't being updated as quick as you would like, right, with new features. Is part of this like a worry that editorial, if it went away, what would you do?
Also, partly, that's not the main reason, but it contributes to that.
Well, I think that this is something you have to consider. Like, considering, how much of your life is living in these applications, you need to have a backup plan for if they die or if they go away.
It's the rule of two for apps. One app is zero apps.
One is none.
One is none. So basically, I wanted to give myself options. And it was kind of tough initially for me to consider this process. Like, what am I going to judge an important workflow and what's, not useless, but maybe secondary, that I can keep editorial in blown up mode, just for that workflow. So I cut my list down to, like 6 or 7 workflows that I need to absolutely have in an automated way in my text editor. And I remembered one day there was this app that I bought couple of years ago called One Writer, and I had basically forgotten about this app. And in the back of my mind, I kind of knew that it was possible to create JavaScript actions inside this app. But maybe, when I was in editorial, I didn't want to acknowledge the fact, or maybe I just didn't need, another app with actions and scripts. But now it was the perfect time to give, One Writer another chance and to see, what can I do with JavaScript. So it was also a good excuse to learn the basics of a new scripting language. I won't lie here, Myke. I kind of have fun doing these type of things. It makes me relax.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe it makes sense for me because I like learning, I like being curious, and I like basically challenging my own brain. And I think it's good for brain health to try new things, to learn every day. Anyway,
how did you come back around to One Writer?
Because again, the process was, okay, I need another option. I need a text editor. What can I do to automate these key tasks? Right. And I just made the connection. One Writer, it has these JavaScript support. I can maybe take a look. And when I first read the documentation, I realized that it wasn't as advanced as editorial, of course. There's no visual workflow building here. It's all scripts, and it's all, JavaScript code. you cannot drag and drop actions. There's no preset actions for you. You're all on your own.
Like this is the scenario for me where like I could dip my toe into editorial like I can with workflow. And we're going to talk about workflow in a little bit because it's visual, right? So I can use it like building blocks. But I was looking at the screenshots of what you're doing with OneWriter, and it's impossible for me to understand. So I was like looking at some of this stuff, and I can see that you're using Coda, right? Which is Coda is so beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Oh my word! I actually bought it recently. I don't even know why I did it. I can't remember the reason why I did this.
Just out of goodwill.
I needed to do something. I can't remember what it was. And I was doing some Googling, and it was like Coda could do it. And it was just like one thing I needed one time. And I was like, man, I do love this app. So I bought it. Because, Panic is just one of those companies. Like, I just want to give them money all the time. Right? Like any reason that I can keep. It's like with these guys. It's like with Smile. It's like with the Omni Group. Like, I just want to give these people money. So I bought Coda for iOS.
It's interesting. There are companies like this. You're just like, let me give you some of my money because I like what you do.
Yeah. Oh, I know what it was. I was kind of, I don't know, looking for a new text editor, and I was like, let me just see. It's like, nope, too powerful. Like, nope, this is not for me. But it's stunning. But anyway, so I'm looking at these screenshots, and I don't understand how any of this works. So how did you even learn JavaScript? Because you don't have a coding background. Like, you're like me. Like, you haven't got a computer science degree or anything like that.
No.
Like so many of our friends do. You don't have any training in it. Like, how did you learn this stuff?
So what I'm about to say will maybe sound like heresy to programmers, but at least for me, so I learned a bit of Python years ago. I read some books, and I did a lot of online documentation. I read the standard library documentation for Python, and a lot of trial and error, Stack Overflow questions and common threads, that kind of stuff. I just learned a bit of Python on my own. And with the basics of Python, I feel like it was very easy to get started with JavaScript because the main ideas are kind of, the same. You create variables. You need to be careful when you want to use plain text, which is called, literal strings. And you just need to learn a bit of commands, and they're called objects and methods in JavaScript. But it's different from Python, and I personally prefer how Python is like more readable. I prefer the syntax, but JavaScript...
I would like to just state for the record that the Connected podcast does not endorse or support any one specific coding language.
No. Yeah, this is just me. I'm totally... So for programmers out there, please don't get upset.
I don't want that kind of follow-up, man. I don't want it.
Yes, please don't be upset. We are nice guys, and I'm just an ignorant person who learned some very basic Python that he uses for very basic scripts that, however, get my job done. So anyway, I basically took a look at some online documentation for JavaScript, and again, a lot of Stack Overflow and just trial and error. A bit of feedback for Coda. So you can edit code in the app, but you cannot run or execute JavaScript. It's not an interpreter. It's just a text editor. So I was looking for something like Pythonista, but for JavaScript on iOS. And sadly, I couldn't find any options, Myke, aside from a single app called IJS, which has not been updated for the iPad Pro, which doesn't look good, but which executes JavaScript on iOS.
Could it be bumping into some kind of App Store rule? Is that the problem, maybe?
No, because Pythonista exists, so
Pythonista's had some problems though over time.
Yeah, but it's fine. It doesn't do. It's got its own interpreter built in. It doesn't do anything to the system that doesn't require your permission.
So when you write the code, you have to put it into OneWriter to execute it to see if it actually works. Your test
exactly.
Put it back in the app. See, that's not elegant enough, really, is it?
No. And if anyone is listening, developers, consider the market for a JavaScript interpreter on iOS. I don't think it's too crazy. You know why, Myke? Because in the next few months, you're going to see, and I'm not going to tell you who or what or when, but you're going to see a lot of developers starting to use JavaScript for automation in their iOS apps. You'll see. I believe there's going to be a market, but we'll follow up on this. Anyway, so yeah, I needed to edit the text in Coda and paste it into OneWriter and see if it worked. There was a lot of trial and error involved, Michael. I spent 2-3 days basically locked into this JavaScript environment, trying to replicate all my workflows. And in the end, I did manage to build them. Maybe they're more simplified. Maybe, they're not as advanced or fancy as the workflows in the tutorial, but they replicate the same functionality. But something even more interesting happened. Because I was using OneWriter in split view, I found myself not needing a lot of the workflows that I used to have in a tutorial as a full screen app. So the ability to use this new text editor alongside maybe Safari or my mail program or something else basically cut many of the needs for workflows into a single app. So because I can look at 2 different apps at the same time, I don't need to do a lot of automation anymore. My workflow for inserting links from the editorial browser into the text editor, now it just became kind of useless for OneWriter because I can just put Safari next to the app, tap and hold the Safari address bar, copy the link, and I create a link in the app because it's got a link button in the shortcut bar thanks to iOS 9. So these iOS 9 features and the ability to use 2 apps at the same time kind of made me reconsider some of my automation. But that's not to say that I don't need automation. So I'm still doing, I have a workflow for generating App Store links. I have another for footnotes. I actually have 2 for footnotes. Today, I just published another one to send my text to Workflow, which has a new action that publishes it to my website because it's got a new WordPress support, which is awesome. So it was an interesting process, and I put a big giant disclaimer at the top. If a tutorial gets an update, I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm probably gonna move back because all this was coming from the perspective of I'm really annoyed because the tutorial doesn't have iOS 9 integration. When it does have iOS 9 features, I'm probably going to be tempted to go back. But
there is a big benefit in doing what you've done.
Exactly.
Because you've kind of flexed your muscles a little bit more and can see that there is options for you outside of editorial, which is very important.
Yeah, and it was fun, first of all, for me. It makes me feel maybe a little more secure about the kind of tools that I use because if editorial disappears, I got this other option. Or if the other option disappears, I got editorial, and it was also, it was informative in a way, not just about JavaScript, but to understand the way that I work. Like, I feel that I understood my needs and my requirements, especially now after iOS 9, a little better, because I now, I like to do this kind of introspection, workflow introspection, I guess you could call it. Every year, I like to understand what I really need, how I can simplify my life, how I can save time, because the end goal for me is, I got 3 goals. I want to write stuff that I'm proud of, I want to make money, and I want to spend time with my family and my friends. So if I can, when it comes to work, if I can create the kind of setup that allows me to do this, I'm really happy. So every year I like to do this kind of self-analysis and trying to understand what I can improve. And this is one of those scenarios. I took a look at what's my key task every day I need to write. And what do I use to write? I use this text editor. And what's the problem here? It doesn't support iOS 9. So what can I do? It was a very fun and I feel useful process, Myke.
So going back to the coding thing, you mentioned that you wrote some code from scratch, even though there were other things out there, right? Like code libraries or whatever you would call it, like examples that you could use. Why did you do that? Why did you decide to write stuff from scratch instead of just borrowing from what other people had done?
Because there was no alternative. There wasn't no one has the need to uh, I don't know, place the cursor next to a footnote and see what the footnote
Right.
says.
So while stuff exists in general, it doesn't exist in the Federico Viticci way.
Exactly. And
Okay.
I'm very nitpicky about
Sure.
the automation that I like to do. So I used, Philip Grunage. He does fantastic job with JavaScript and with Python also on his website, One Tap Less. So I borrowed, his App Store action for OneWriter, and I had to modify it to my needs. But, if I didn't have Philip's work as an inspiration and as a model, I wouldn't probably be able to do that because it requires, web actions. Beyond my knowledge, but I could modify it to show lists, to give me options and that kind of stuff. In many cases, I like to use something that it's made by other people, so I can also save the time I would have spent, making it my own and writing it from scratch. But in the majority of the workflows that are really key to what I do, like footnotes or markdown links in editorial, uh, I always need to make them from scratch, because the time that I spend optimizing a workflow made by someone else, I could have used that to make it from scratch and to make it better from the get-go. So when possible, I like to download workflows from others. But in general, I try to use, and this is also the reason why I make my actions and my workflows available to other people. I try to use them more as a learning tool, as a like, I take a look at what another person does, and then I'm gonna use that knowledge to make my own workflow, to make my own setup here, because I can take a look at the example. This is what I do, Myke. I download stuff by other people. I take a look, I learn, I try, I fail, I spend 2 days, I text you, you tell me I'm crazy, and then we do a podcast about it.
For the remaining actions that you have in editorial, the ones that you can't recreate, I'm assuming because they're too complex, maybe. What is the backup there? Like, do you have any thinking in mind? Like, what are you going to do with some of those? If, preparing for, it's not, right? There's no reason to say that editorial is going away. There's no reason to say it won't get an update. But what this has highlighted is a potential hole in your system, a little chink in your armor, you may say. Like, what is the backup there for you that if or say, for example, Apple pulled this app from the App Store, like, what would you do?
So what I can do is, if really there's no alternative to editorial on iOS, my more advanced actions are basically all based on Python. So I can take the Python code, basically replace some of the visual actions with more Python code, and I can use the code in Pythonista. If also, there's a problem with Pythonista, maybe it goes away, disappears, or Apple removes it, I can take the Python code and use it on my Mac. So if there's no option, Python code is open to everyone. I can still use that in some form on some machine. So, the worst case scenario is I end up with a bunch of Python and I need to run it on my Mac. But, I don't think that's going to happen.
Have you ever thought about having somebody build something for you?
Yes. I considered the option a few years ago, just make these apps for me. Maybe I will consider it again in the future, because I was thinking about this just before editorial came out, basically 3 years ago, when I was recovering from treatments. I was like, maybe now I should just consider making, apps for me that I can use and that I can pay to keep them updated all the time. Then editorial came around, and I started playing with editorial and then workflow and all these other apps. But now it's been in the back of my mind again, to kind of say, hey, maybe if someone was making this app, like an internal app just for me, maybe I could have the craziest features available exactly the way that I want them. I don't know, Myke. It's something that I think about every once in a while, and lately more often, but I don't think it's happening anytime soon.
So there was one piece that I wanted to read, a little quote which was from the article that you wrote, which of course is in our show notes, and it goes like this: by being able to use OneWriter alongside other apps with split view on iOS 9, I'm finding myself depending on fewer workflows. Using 2 apps at the same time has enabled me to cut down the number of steps required to reduce time spent editing, researching material, or publishing articles to WordPress. Now, when I read this, I had like a flashback to your iOS 8 review, where you spoke about how you were using URL schemes less and less because Apple were building in tools to reduce that requirement.
Oh yeah.
And
That's
it reminded me a lot of that. So it's like the same kind of idea that this is a display to me that, contrary to what many people may say or believe, including us at times, the iOS is growing and becoming more powerful.
Yeah.
And like some of the crazy stuff that Federico Viticci has done over the years is now kind of being implemented in Apple's way.
Yeah, actually, that's great. Follow up, Myke. I had forgotten about that. I'm still using URL schemes. Just today, for example, in the OneWriter workflow communication, but that's maybe the only URL scheme I've used in like 6 months. So definitely, I've seen, especially starting last year with iOS 8 and extensions, I've seen myself, kind of coming from this perspective of, I've been relying on these crazy workarounds for many years to speed up, the time that I spend in those apps, and now I'm using these system features, and it's happening again this year. With multitasking and split view. I'm like, if I'm looking at 2 apps at the same time, is there really anything to automate anymore? Because I can just move the data with these 2 apps that are available to me at the same time. And definitely I've been noticing, moving from trying to trick the system into using the system in a way. I'm not employing so many workarounds anymore. In fact, I think I'm using native features more and more in combination with, standalone apps. So it's not like I'm using URL schemes and bookmarklets to move from app to app, because that's kind of an option. I'm using split view, I'm using the shortcut bar, I'm using extensions. Then if developers take advantage of these features, to build crazy apps such as workflow or drafts or, OneWriter, that's even better. But the key aspect here is iOS has improved. And for people who get work done like me, and not just about blogging, or writing reviews, this extends to many other aspects of working and doing these productive tasks on iOS. The system is now capable enough, and there is a parallel maybe to last year, Myke. So I'll give you credit. That's good follow up.
This isn't the only thing that you've been playing around with this week. It's been like Federico workflow week. So we have a couple of other little interesting things to talk about. But before that, let's take a break to thank Fracture for sponsoring this week's episode of Connected. Fracture is the company that will take your favorite images and print them directly onto a lovely sheet of glass for you to proudly display or give as gifts. Fracture prints really are something special. As we said before, we love what Fracture make. I have a bunch of Fractures. We all have Fractures, and the reason is because they do look so fantastic. It's also great working with this company. They're so passionate about what they do. They love it when they get the opportunity to print people's important moments, the things that they care about or achievements and accomplishments that they've made onto these glass prints. They love that, and we love being able to talk about what they do. I have so many Fracture prints, like in a home of podcast artwork, and I'm looking forward to getting some more real soon. Because it's one of those things, like Fractures are just, I don't know, it's just such a beautiful little thing to have. It takes these images that we have in our photo rolls and in our streams or our websites or, in our computers, allows us to put them and display them proudly somewhere. It really makes it a very different thing when you kind of put a picture of your family on the wall rather than having it, in your photo stream. It's a way to rescue those photos and display them proudly. And Fracture is the best place to do that. They assemble them all by hand in their factory in Gainesville, Florida. And I will mention again, we are not far away from the holiday season now. If you want to make sure that you try and get those in at time for December, if you're thinking about buying some Fractures for somebody as a gift or having them gifted to you by a family member, make sure that you go to fractureme.com and get started as soon as possible, because their factory gets very, very busy, and rightly so, because their prints are so fantastic. So head on over to fractureme.com to learn more and get started now. You'll be able to pick from some great sizes. You'll be able to pick from hanging on the wall, mounting them. You can get a little stand to some of the smaller ones. They have great square and rectangle sized prints that they can do for you. And if you use the code CONNECTED at checkout, you will not only get 15% off your first order, you'll also help support this show, which of course is very important to you, I hope, as it's important to us that we can stick around. Once again, huge thanks to Fracture for supporting Relay FM. And don't forget, if you get some Fractures printed, I love to see pictures of them, so feel free to tweet them to me. I like to see what people get printed out onto their Fractures. So Federico, the Workflow app, has also continued to be a big and important thing to you, and there's also some new stuff there you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, today the app was updated to include a new publish to WordPress action, which is exactly what I've been dreaming to have for basically forever on my iPad. So you can now send any text or rich text or images to your WordPress blog or blogs, because you can add multiple accounts, both WordPress.com and self-hosted WordPress.org blogs. The latter is what I use at MacStories. You can send any text, and you can pre-program any specific field. So you can set a title, or you can set categories or tags or slugs, excerpts, all the basic fields of a WordPress item. You can access in Workflow. You can put in some text. You can use variables. You can combine them with actions, and you can build workflows just for WordPress, which is amazing. And again, I've been trying to do this for many, many years. I remember back in 2010 or 11, maybe. I got this link in the review today. I started to use Blogsy, which used to be one of the first blog editors for the iPad. It got a really skeuomorphic interface back in the day. It was one of the first apps to kind of bring the ideal, of Mars Edit on iOS.
Was that the one with the rabbit?
The rabbit? No,
a little rabbit icon.
Oh yeah, maybe it had a rabbit. Maybe.
Yeah, I think they had a little rabbit.
Like a black icon, maybe.
I don't know. I remember a cartoon, or maybe that was something else. I remember there was an app that had like a cartoon rabbit, and it was like a Mars Edit type app. But anyway.
No, this one is blogsyapp.com. It got a typewriter icon.
Okay.
And I remember, being fascinated by this idea. So I was coming from of course, 5 years ago from the background as a heavy Mac user, and I was looking at the iPad, and the thought of being able to get work done on iOS was starting to fascinate me. And I saw this app, and I remember Blogsy was not perfect. It had many, many issues, but it was the start of something new for me. And through the years, I've been looking for. I've tried all of the WordPress capable apps on iOS. Posts was another one. Poster was the one that it became my favorite. It got acquired by Automatic, the company, or how do you say Automatic?
I just say Automatic. Like,
yeah, it's got two T's.
You can't pronounce those extra T's. Like, you just can't do that.
So it got acquired by the parent company of WordPress, and it was my favorite. And then I moved in 2013 to public. I was so annoyed by, there's no perfect WordPress client that does exactly what I want. I'm just gonna make my own, and that's what I did. In the tutorial, I was using Python to access the XML RPC API, which is an API that lets you talk to your WordPress blog. And I built, over the course of many, many weeks, I built what I thought was the perfect workflow for me. So with exactly the same, the precise sequence of steps that I want. So first it lets me confirm a title, then it asks me for categories, then it lets me use tags, and then it finally publishes the article to my website, and it takes me to the website to make sure that everything looks okay. So for 2 years, Myke, I've been using this workflow to publish content to MacStories for both normal articles and linked items when I link to someone else. I've been using this every single day for 2 years, and it was a very ugly code, but it got the job done, and it was practical.
Sometimes that's the way, man. It doesn't need to be pretty. It just needs to work.
It wasn't pretty, and it worked, but many times it threw me an error because, it wasn't the perfect piece of script, because I didn't build any error checking routine into the code. So it just failed sometimes. And if I had too many tags on WordPress, it just didn't work. So periodically I needed to go through my WordPress backend and clean up some tags. It wasn't perfect, but I've been using it to publish, my iPad review, my cancer story. All my important articles were published that way, except the iPad review that I needed to paste into the website first and save as a draft and very nervously confirm that the embargo time was up and that I could publish. I just, didn't trust Python for that. But everything else, 99% of my articles, all done with the ugly Python code. So when the workflow team approached me a few weeks ago, they were like, hey, we want to make a WordPress action. Can you give us some feedback? I was ecstatic. Doesn't even describe the kind of feeling, It's like the single aspect of your job gets drastically improved overnight. It's like you need to transport something for a living, and overnight you go from very tiresome transportation to being in charge of a space rocket. That was what I keep thinking about. It was such an improvement for me, and this action is amazing because I can combine that with anything, and it's not Python code. It's got an interface. It's got menus that I can see and that I can customize, and I can use it, with any text editor. Not just with one writer, which is what I'm doing now, but I can use it in drafts if I want. I can use it with notes if I want. I can use it in an editorial. And this is the kind of freedom, that using plain text, using Markdown, and relying on the system, not on a single workaround or not on a single app. This is the kind of freedom that you get. You have portability of your workflows. You can move from app to app because, the iOS share sheet is open to every app. And workflow, as long as you give it text, it's going to publish to WordPress. And so I've been, all the articles that you've seen on MacStories for the past couple of weeks, they're all being done with workflow on my iPad or the iPhone with this action. And it's so much better for me, Myke. I'm just so happy.
So what actually makes this different then? So is it just making the step easier? Is it still going through all the same processes that you went through? So like how is this publish to workflow action even working?
So it's the same steps. I provide some text, which is my article's text, and I copy the file name of my txt file, which is what I used to write, to the iOS clipboard. And the workflow applies title case, which is the kind of format that I like for my headlines. Lets me confirm the title, if maybe I need to make sure the title case looks okay, or if I want to make some last minute changes to the headline. And then it takes the text and it asks me, is this a normal article or is this a linked post? If it's a linked post, I pick a link that I want to use as the actual web page that I'm linking to. If it's not, it just goes straight to WordPress. And in the WordPress action, what it does is it uses the title that I provided as the article title. I'm logged into my account, so it uses Federico Vitici as the author. He publishes now, so I don't have to take care of any timestamp. And he uses the plain text, the markdown that I gave it, Because on Mac Stories we use Jetpack, which is a plugin from Automatic that lets us use Markdown in our backend, and it looks like HTML to readers. So it's these are the three steps that I like. Of course, I didn't mention categories and tags. It asks me for a title, asks me for taxonomy, so categories and tags, and it asks me for a linked or regular article. I need to be able to manually confirm all of these parameters, and I need to be able to make that choice. I don't want the computer to make that choice for me. And after that, it just goes to WordPress. I don't have to do any copy and paste. I don't have to use the WordPress app. I don't need to manually confirm, yes, this is me, or yes, I want to publish now. It just does everything automatically. And it takes me to Safari, to macstories.net, automatically at the end of the process, so I can confirm that the new post is indeed at the top of the website, and I can, go back to work on something else.
So I guess the benefit for you then is now that you're able to do this from wherever you are. Like, in theory, you could publish to WordPress from the Notes app?
Yes.
Right.
And not only is it available anywhere, it's much, much faster and more reliable than my ugly Python code. It can fetch hundreds of tags with no problem. It can, communicate errors if something happens instead of just failing. And it's a much better interface for WordPress because it's all done natively with iOS APIs instead of being, a Python workaround in a tutorial. It's available anywhere and it's faster, and I trust it more than my very poor coding skills. So.
And so this is like just another example of the workflow app continuing to grow. Like, they have really put a lot of work into this over time, and it seems to be getting more and more powerful for people.
Yeah, these guys are just insane. I see a lot of potential for workflow going forward to expand to many different services. And the idea of WordPress, it's not completely done yet. For instance, you cannot update an existing article. You can only publish a new one. And you gotta believe that eventually you will get a more complete suite of WordPress actions. But, this idea of workflow started as kind of an automator for iOS. Because, the interface and the idea of drag and drop and system integrations. But now it's become much more than that, because it's perfectly and easily integrated with apps, and it communicates with all these different web services. It's much more than what Apple is doing with Automator on OS X, which is kind of forgotten anyway. This is a modern take and a fresh one also on automation on iOS, communication between apps, and integrating with all these different attach points. So you can have an action extension, you can have a today widget, you can run the app normally, or you can put a shortcut on your home screen. You can use 3D touch. So it's this sort of automation layer spread across all of these different iOS features, and you can use it in any kind of app that you want. And it's this kind of freedom and portability that it makes me feel much, much better about automating in workflow rather than being constrained inside a single app and then wondering what's going to happen. You could make the same argument. What happens if workflow goes away? Well, then I go back to programming anyway,
Yeah, because that was why I wanted to talk about this as well, because it's interesting to see how the workflow app is continuing to be really, really actively developed. And I'm trying not to cast aspersions on the editorial, right? Whatever, it's just they're just different. Where it seems like editorial was receiving work but at a slower pace, and workflow, from what I can understand, there is a team of people that work on this app. I'm interested to know, like, I don't know if you know, the workflow developers, do they do this for a living?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
So, but this isn't all they do, though, right? They have like an app called Desk Connect or something as well.
Yeah, but they're really focused on workflow, I think.
So that is, it seems to be doing very well for them. I wish as with always these apps, I wish that they would do something more that I could pay for again. because
Yeah,
you
me
worry
too.
about these things going away. And
Yeah.
workflow is like, like with many of these things, I use it very, very lightly, and I really wish that I used it more. But it's, for me, it's interesting that like a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to Brad at the Pen Addict, and I wanted him to make a GIF of something. It's just a way that a specific pen action moved, and he was going to put it on his site. And I was like, you should make a GIF. And he was like, how should I do that? And I opened up the App Store to start searching for like an app to turn a video into a GIF. And I was like, no, hang on a minute. And then I just opened Workflow and built it for him.
That's
And I was
awesome.
like, that feels good. Right, because I know how to use that app. It's so simple for me to use, and I every now and then I just have to remind myself like that is just something I can go into, and I'm able to build and chain together some basic things. Like it was the same as the other day. Somebody sent me a Dropbox link of an MP3 file on iOS. I was on iOS, and like it's so frustrating that sometimes Dropbox links on iOS, they just give you a player, like you can't download them to your Dropbox, right? And it's like, why does this do this? So I opened Workflow, I threw the MP3 file in there, and it uploaded to my Dropbox, right? Like I built that to do that. Like take this MP3 file, extract it, upload it to Dropbox, job done. So it is extremely powerful, and for me, it's like this stuff exists on the Mac, but I don't know how to do it, right? It's more complicated.
Yeah.
Like Automator is way more complicated for me than Workflow.
Yes, it is, Myke.
So it's really interesting that I can do this stuff more powerfully on iOS, I'm sure other people can do it way easier on the Mac than I can on iOS, but there's this tool out there that I can use for this stuff, and it's really cool, and I'm very happy that it exists, and it's cool that it's getting continually updated and more powerful over time.
That's what some people don't understand when they say, oh yeah, look at the iPad, now you're so cute, you can make workflows to download files. Well, we've been doing that on the Mac for 20 years. That's true, but these people are maybe missing the point that there's a sense of feeling, free in a way when you're able to. Maybe you're in a rush, or you're talking to a friend, and you gotta make a GIF, or you gotta download a file, and you can do that wherever you are on a phone, and you can use a 3G connection to work with the web, and you don't have to sit down at a desk and know programming. You can just drag and drop actions, and I can do it. My mom can do it because I tried. A kid in China. A kid in China can do it because it's available on the App Store, and it's like it's this utility that has many possibilities. And I get the argument about you can do this on a Mac, but there's a feeling of, in a way, liberation in being able to do that on a mobile device. And I truly believe that even if these apps go away, even if editorial eventually disappears, or workflow, or drafts, or Pythonista, automation always finds a way. And we've been here before. When there were no apps, we used URL schemes and JavaScript and bookmarklets, and it wasn't as good as it is today, but it got the job done, for many people. And I believe that if things change, if Apple changes their mind, I don't think so. I think it'll only get better from here. But we can go back, we can figure out something else. And, people who need to get work done on a computer, those who care about it, tend to find a way to do it faster or more efficiently. So I'm really an optimist at heart, Myke, and I believe we'll always find a way. But what you mentioned about helping friends kind of put together workflows. If you allow me here, I wanted to mention that I'm doing something similar for Collab Mac Stories members. Starting this week, there's going to be a workflow corner in Mac Stories Weekly.
Nice.
Yeah, people can ask me, because this always happens on Twitter via email. So members can ask me, ideas for workflows, or questions for inspiration for how can I do this? Do you have any recommendation? And I thought it was fun to kind of put together a mix of the teacher tip and the weekly Q&A session. It's kind of like that, it's a combination of the two. It's gonna be fun. I got a few requests already to make workflows for other people to kind of respond to questions. That's what I'm gonna do. It's gonna be fun. So it's gonna be available in issue 10. Already 10 issues. Crazy of Mac Stories Weekly. It's gonna be sent later this Friday, and actually more like Saturday morning, because Myke, I'm gonna celebrate Thanksgiving this year. Also.
Oh yeah.
Yes, I am. Finally, my dream is coming true. One of Sylvia's teachers is from the US, is now living in America, and the entire dance school is throwing a Thanksgiving dinner to celebrate with the teacher and all of the students and, boyfriends and girlfriends.
That's going to be amazing.
Yeah, that's gonna be so nice. It's gonna be like 30 people. It's gonna be crazy.
So, where can people sign up for Club Mac Stories, Federico?
Club.macstories.net. And you can find all the options there.
And that's where you can get some artisanally crafted workflows from Federico Viticci.
Yes, directly from the source. That's what's going on here, Myke.
Okay, Federico, I have an Apple Pencil now, and I want to talk about it a little bit and talk about the fact that I wrote a review for it. So I think that might be a little fun to explore. But before I do that, let me just thank Squarespace for helping support this week's episode as well. You can start building your own website today at squarespace.com, and you want to use the offer code WORLD at checkout. That will get you 10% off. Squarespace, build it beautiful. When it comes to finding a place for yourself on the internet, Squarespace is somewhere that you should be checking out. They give you all of the power that you need to build a website just as you like, and they take away all the stuff that you usually have to worry about and fight through. Like stuff like, where's your hosting going to come from? How are you going to cache this thing in case it gets popular? What about scaling? What if you get stuck with something? If you don't have a service like Squarespace, you're going to be lost with a lot of this stuff. They give you all of the tools that you need and back it up with fantastic 24/7 support as well. Squarespace have state-of-the-art technology that they use to power all of their sites. They ensure security and stability, and they're trusted by millions of people around the world, and some of their tools are just fantastic. Like, their templates are so beautiful, and they all feature really powerful stuff like responsive design. You can drag and drop things around, and it's going to look great on all platforms. You can very easily customize your Squarespace website. It's good for anything as well. Maybe you want to set up a store. They have commerce functionality. Maybe you have a portfolio that you want to set up. They have great galleries to do that. They have really great themes and tools for restaurants and for bands. They have like music players and maps integration. Squarespace have everything. And it's not just for people that don't know how to do these types of things. It's also for people that just don't want to have to worry about setting up everything from scratch. And if you are the type of person that does know how to do these types of stuff, maybe you just want to go in and customize some things. Squarespace have their dev platform, so you get all of the power of Squarespace and all of the great features, but you're still able to go in and make some tweaks here and there to just make it just exactly how you want. Like, you have that particular little thing that you want to do, and you can make that happen. So if you want to sign up for Squarespace, their plans start at just $8 a month, and you're going to love it. And if you sign up for a year, you also get a free domain name as well. You can start a free trial today with no credit card required and start building your own website immediately by going to squarespace.com. So you can just go and try it out. And then when you decide to sign up, make sure that you use the offer code WORLD at checkout. You'll get 10% off your first purchase and show your support for this show. Thank you so much to Squarespace for supporting Relay FM. Squarespace, build it beautiful. So I finally have an Apple Pencil here. Hang on a second. There we go. That's the Apple Pencil.
Hi.
Hello. Just to prove that I have it, I mean, only the Apple Pencil could make that sound, of course. I would like to just reiterate that Apple need to get their stuff together. I had this pencil came to me via Marco Arment from New York City.
Wow.
Yeah, this is the only way. They're still not in London. I cannot find them. I've still been checking in with people and the Apple Store reps, and it still seems like they're just not coming into the store. There might be some in certain places, but they're not readily available. But Marco was able to get his hands on a couple of them, and he very, very kindly FedExed it to me. And I've had it for about maybe 4 or 5 days, something like that, maybe a little bit longer, close to a week now. And this was a product that I felt so strongly about that I wrote a review of it, which is a very rare thing for me to do.
A review with text, Myke,
actual written word.
Wow. Okay.
And I published this. Well, I gave this to Brad Dowdy of the Pen Addict to publish it because the Pen Addict felt like a really great avenue, a real great venue for me to express my thoughts about this, because the way that I was coming to this and my feelings about the Apple Pencil is, how is this as a handwriting tool right? Because, I do the Pen Addict podcast with Brad every week, and we're very closely connected on this stuff. And it felt to me like this was where it would go, right? Because I put a link in the post to an episode 11 of the Pen Addict, where we spoke about digital tools like styluses and stuff like that and how we felt about them. And in that episode, we were talking about how we both really kind of would like the idea of being able to take real handwritten notes on the iPad. This episode was published on April 24th, 2012. So this is something I've wanted for a long time.
Wow, okay.
And the Apple Pencil delivers. Like that's my overall feeling about this is I can take the iPad and the Apple Pencil, the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil, and I can write on it, right? Like I can use it and I can write a sentence. If I take a piece of paper and a pen and write on that piece of paper and I compare the two of them, they look the same. And that was what it always was. That was always the problem, is that previous styluses and previous apps, you would have to write in a very exaggerated way, right? You couldn't be precise about this stuff. At least in a way that made me happy. It was easier to be more precise with drawing tools, but handwriting is very, very precise movement required to correctly handwrite, because you're writing very small and you're making very small and subtle movements, but they make a massive difference. And I have not found any product that has been able to do this before, but the Apple Pencil 100% delivers on that. And I really, really couldn't be happier with this as a handwriting input tool.
It was fascinating to read your review, Myke. You sent me a copy before you published it.
And you very kindly corrected my grammar, yes.
I got a script for that, Myke. But I also read it, and it was really a good one. And I think that you bring a unique perspective that, a lot of people, including me, don't have, because personally, I don't use physical pens anymore. So I think it was a great idea to publish it on the Pen Addict. But I wanted to ask you about, writing your review. Does this come from maybe a dissatisfaction with the launch reviews and the fact that no one, including me, focused on the kind of aspects that you wanted to cover or to know more about?
The problem was twofold. One, well, actually, let's say threefold, as it can increase the folds. One, I was dissatisfied, right? Because nobody wrote about this from a handwriting perspective. Just nobody did that. Two, I didn't really feel like anybody cares about it the way that I do. And I didn't trust anybody else's opinion when I was asking them for how it was for handwriting. Because nobody could, including yourself, as much as I love you, could really give me an answer that I trusted. Because nobody really cares about this stuff like I do. Yeah, I was dissatisfied. Just simply because there is just no one that well, there are, but of the people that got these things to review, everybody's talking about this thing as how it is to draw, how the movement is. And they would say, oh yeah, you can write. But it's like, no, there are so many specific things about this that need to be right for me. And one of the ones that I really focus on in the review is the weight. Now, this is something that is so important in these types of tools and is very often just forgotten about. But to people like me who care about these types of implements, I love pens and I love pencils. The weighting of these products is so important. And the thing is, like, what Apple did was they put weights in this to, I believe, to serve two purposes. One is to stop the pencil from rolling away easily. The other is they are magnetic, right? So you can lightly attach the pencil to the edge of the iPad, right? It is not a storing device. It is merely, I think, to just place it down while you type or something like that, which is great that it does that. But the way they have done this is key to me, that there is a weight that goes the whole way across the pencil. And it feels like the inside is solid to a point. And the reason that this is important is that when you hold it, it is balanced. It is not too heavy on one end or the other. That can be killer to a pen, right? If it's too heavy, because there's a lot of stuff, like with a fountain pen, all of the I'll say mechanism just to make it easy. All of the stuff like is right at the bottom, right at the edge of the pen, right? You've got the nib there, you have what's called the feed, which delivers the ink to the nib, the cartridge, and everything is right at the front of the pen, you'd say, like close to the nib. So to make a great pen, in a lot of instances, there has to be some weighting that goes on at the back of it, or you need to make it shorter so it's more balanced. But because the Apple Pencil is so large, right? It's very large in size, which further kind of enforces why they went with pencil name rather than pen. They've done good work in making sure that the entire thing is well balanced, and when you hold it in your hand, it is a substantial thing, which is also important because that adds a level of this is a quality product, but it also just kind of it helps you control the pencil when you're making fine movement. This is kind of like, and the reason I wanted to write this is the iPad Pro. So people look at the iPad Pro and they're like, that is the Federico Viticci product.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is for you. The Apple Pencil is mine. This is my product.
I'm flattered, Myke, but I agree. It's definitely your kind of accessory. It's just for you. And it's so different to have you write instead of podcasts, and I keep saying this, you should do more of this, Myke, and now I want to say publicly, I feel like there are certain things that you're really good at writing about. And can you describe the process for you to write a review? Like, how many drafts did you make? Like, did you go back and forth with a version of the review or another version? Like, what's your writing process, Myke? Did you use the pencil to handwrite the review?
So this is the thing, right? Is that I'm not an amazing writer, but I'm not a bad one. Like, I feel like I can do stuff. Like, no one is criticizing my ability to write when they're reading this piece, which makes me feel good, right? It's like, great. No one's saying, dude, what are you even doing? Like, you don't even make any sense. And a lot of this comes from, and many people that I know that write do this. Like, I shared it with some friends and they corrected some things and highlighted some things for me, which is part of everybody's process, I think. Because a lot of my friends are writers and I see lots of drafts, right? Like, just on a daily basis, things just come away like, hey, what do you think of this? It is a normal thing, right? But for me, the process of writing is not something that I specifically enjoy in the same way that you do, or Steven does, or Jason does, right? Like, that is not a thing that I really love to do unless I have a really good reason. So, like, when the Apple Pencil was coming to me, I was like, it might be fun to write about this, so I just had it in my mind. And then after I started using it for a couple of days, I was like, no, I have to. Like, this is the thing, this is a thing I want to write about because I want to increase the amount of people that could see my opinion on this. Because I'll talk about it on the show. It's like, this is the third show this week where I'm talking about the Apple Pencil, right? And, I believe that there is benefit to listening to all of them because I purposely talk about different things in each show. But, like, I can talk about this until the cows come home. I can talk about it forever. But I want to make sure that a lot of people see it. And from what Brad has told me, a lot of people have seen the review.
I've seen the link everywhere, Myke. Good job.
Which makes me feel good as well. But, like, so to go back to my process, the first thing for me is I have to have a really good reason to start writing because I just don't enjoy it, Federico. Like, with the podcasting, it's so easy. I can just talk. I just talk and people just follow me as I'm talking. But with writing, you've got to have like a real heavy structure, right? The structure has to be a lot more rigid. You have to really think about it in a different way. Like right now, I just stumbled over my words a little bit, but that's totally fine. Like in the podcast, people don't care about it. But they do in the writings. You have to be more considerate about it. It's just not my approach for getting my opinions and thoughts out there in a usual like day-to-day basis. So I struggle with it a little bit, and it takes me some time. So the only way that I ever really write is when I have something that pushes me so much that it takes away the slog of it because it's something I really want to do. And I wrote this piece over 2 sessions of maybe an hour or so each, and then just making some corrections after sending it to a couple of people. So it was probably maybe like 3 hours work. because I was so pumped up to do it that I really just went with it. Because you know how we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago about when you just have that hook, and then once you get the hook, it just flows out of you.
Nice.
Like that, it happened to me as well. Like I knew what I was writing, right? And it was a simple hook. It was just like, compare this thing to the pens you use every day. And once that hit me, I went for it. And one of the big parts for me was when I was talking about the weight of the device and the fact that it rolls, right? Like Apple have tried to implement the weights to stop it from rolling, but if you drop the pencil, or like from like a height, or if you give it any kind of speed or momentum, people don't like it when I talk about momentum, it can actually, the weights inside of it propel it forward in a way that you don't want, because as it rolls over and over and over again, it speeds up because it's got weight in it. And I was comparing that to Mark Newson, who works at Apple now, designed a pen for Mont Blanc, and his Mont Blanc pen was a cylindrical pen, but the cap had a clip on it. And it was just interesting to me to be like, I really wish that they would have put a clip on this thing. But that is like a little thing that only I know because I care, right? Did you know that Mark Newson designed a Mont Blanc fountain pen?
No,
but I do. And I think that that's interesting because he works at Apple's design team. So I expect he had a hand in this. So that, he might be the reason why there's weights in this thing in the first place, right? They didn't want to put a clip on it, but he was like, but this thing's going to roll off the desk. You never know, but like I find that sort of stuff interesting. So like I found my hook and I started the writing process, and I wrote the whole thing on my iPad Pro on the software keyboard in Byword, and I had the Notes app pinned to the side because, like I do with a lot of stuff now, when I get a new thing, whether it's a video game because we're talking about it on the show, or I get a new app that I really like that is important, or I get like a new hardware device, I immediately open the Notes app, start a new heading, and just start taking notes. I talk about what I think about the hardware, what I think about software integration. I take little notes of interesting things that come up. I do that now, which is kind of cool. I think that's probably what a lot of people like yourself do as well. I mean, I do it for the shows, but it was the same for the pencil. Like I just have a notes document that just has a bunch of different tidbits and thoughts, and I use that as a way to help structure the review that I wrote.
Is there anything that you feel you didn't say, or maybe that you didn't say quite right in the review, and if you could go back, you would say differently, or maybe explain more?
I don't think that I focused enough or gave enough detail about the apps that I was using. So like, I spoke about a couple of different apps that I'd used, like Notability and GoodNotes, and there are some more out there, like for actual handwriting, like OneNote, for example, which I didn't really test. And that was just a matter of timing. I wanted to get this thing out as soon as possible because, the product's been out for a couple of weeks now. So the timing is, it's getting older and older for this review to be relevant.
Yeah. It happens to me as well. When you have an idea or maybe a specific angle on a story and you feel like I need to get this out as soon as possible because other people maybe are going to do the same. And, there's an argument to be made about, if you're unique enough, if you are differentiated enough, maybe people are still going to care about you. But if you want to put an article in front of as many people as possible, having it be unique and new, helps a lot. And I've seen, a lot of people refer to your review as the pen guy uses the pencil. And that's a unique angle that's like it catches the attention. It's got a specific twist to it. And you were definitely right in saying, I want to get this out as soon as possible. So maybe I will skip some sections for the greater good, basically.
Yeah. There's nothing to say that at some point, I mean, I don't have a specific desire to do this right now, but I might follow up with more thoughts about the note-taking apps as more come on the market and more get updated to support the pencil, because that's something that I'm going to keep playing with. So potentially in the future, I might look at that again. But yeah, that's the one thing is I wished I kind of spent more time with third-party stuff. I spoke a lot about the sketching tools in the Notes app because they are the best right now, but it's not the best app for handwriting. Like, for example, OneNote does OCR of what you write into it, right? And so I think that into the future, that's going to be amazing. But right now, they don't have any specific support for the pencil. right? They just don't have that. So I'm
OneNote?
waiting. Yeah.
I think they do actually.
No, in the app. So you can. I'm gonna open it right now. Word does, but this doesn't. So you can click on draw.
What's the
then,
difference?
Well, so you click on draw and you click stylus, and you have two options: pencil by 53.
Oh yeah.
Or other.
Okay.
And then it's like, how do you hold a pen? Like they're trying to do their own palm rejection stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it works, but it's not complete, I don't think.
And it's different in Word.
I haven't used Word for it, in all honesty.
Who does?
Exactly.
Apparently, a lot of people do.
It seems to me right now that they are not using. They're not using all of the tools that are available.
I see. Yeah, I've been playing with OneNote, for features like the shared notebooks. There's still like the stuff that I keep in Evernote, OCR. I'm not sure I can do that in Notes. Do you know if you can do OCR in Notes? I don't think you can.
In the Notes app?
Yeah.
No.
I think if you maybe, I think I remember from my review, if you send a PDF that's already been OCR'd, you can search for the text inside the PDF, but definitely you cannot do that for images or handwriting, I think. Yeah, maybe. I could be wrong about the PDFs, by the way. That's just what I remember. So I'm also playing around with OneNote. It's a pretty cool app. It's got quite a few differences from Evernote, but it's cool. So
one of the things for me about OneNote is, though, it doesn't look like an iPad app.
Yeah, it looks like a PC app, kind of. The ribbon toolbar at the top. It's very Microsoft-y.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you to kind of this.
Microsoft say on their blog that they do support the Apple Pencil with OneNote, but I don't know. It feels a little bit weird to me. Maybe I need to try it out more. Maybe I've just not given it a good enough shake. Maybe
it's one of those early support, and there's going to be more features.
That's kind of how it feels, in all honesty. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I haven't given it a fair shake, and I probably should. And I definitely will, but it's just one that I haven't gotten around to just yet. Because, I don't know, like I open OneNote and I'm like, you just look weird to me. Like the app just looks kind of weird. It's like, hello, Microsoft. I don't know, like it just looks like a PC app in an iPad. I don't know, maybe
that's also what I feel like. So I wanted to ask you, Myke. I assume you're going to be continuing to use the pencil on a daily basis now.
Yeah.
So how do you use it, like in practice? What do you do?
So I have been taking notes on it. I like to kind of do some doodles here and there. But one of the other things is when I'm using my iPad now for like, I'm sitting down and doing some work on it, I have the pencil in my hand and I use it to navigate iOS.
Really?
Yeah.
Like every day?
Yeah.
So you're using the iPad as with a stylus?
It's a pen tablet, yeah.
It's a pen tablet.
It works really well.
And you're happy with it?
I love it. So I will preface by saying that for my Mac, I use a Wacom now.
Okay.
So I use pen input on my Mac.
Yeah, I know, for the RSI stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also now, I actually just really like it.
Okay.
But the precision that the pencil gives in all applications is very beneficial. For like text selection is far superior with the pencil than trying to do it with my finger. Like I get the cursor where I want it to be rather than like hitting it and then having to press and hold and then drag it again. And dragging the little blue bar thingamajigs is way easier with the pencil. But more than that, like I like scrolling lists with it. I like just hitting small interface UI things with it. It works for me, man. Like just as a way to use this device, it feels kind of natural to me. It's so big that like having this like pointing device kind of it works. Like this is why stylus styluses exist on these big devices in the first place. Like it is just beneficial to have this other little thing that interacts with the UI. I don't know. I really like it, but I may be in a minority here. But for me, it just really works as a way to interact with the device. I'm sure that you do not do that.
No, Myke. Do you feel like you could, you would like to be able to kind of attach the pencil magnetically to the iPad, like like a permanent placement for the stylus?
No, magnetics is a bad permanent placement because magnets fall off really easily. Right? Not like, if something is magnetically attached and I put it in my bag and the pencil just snags on the edge of my bag, the pencil's gone forever. Right? Yeah. I want a case that I can just slip it into.
You want an iPad case with a pencil holder.
Yeah.
Someone has to be making this, Myke.
Well, I mean, it would be very easy to do. Say for example, say a smart case. You know how you kind of fold the smart case up and under?
Yeah.
Like one of those panels could have just a little slip thing that you pop it into.
Yeah, I guess.
On the outside. So the middle panel or whatever could have a little hole and you just slide the pencil into it because it would never get in the way.
Imagine a case that's also a keyboard and it's got a case for the pencil.
Man, that would be
all in
killer.
One.
That would be killer. I mean, people are making this stuff and I'm going to keep my eye out for it. But this is just... It's a product that just makes sense to me. These two things together, the iPad Pro and the pencil, just makes sense. It's such a big device that it feels like I can manipulate it in different ways and use it in different ways. Like, for example, we wanted to make a couple of changes to our website, and we were trying to explain to our designer and developer the way that we wanted it to be done. And we couldn't really explain it over the web. So I took a screenshot of the page, open paper by 53, and just drew on the page what I wanted to be done.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Like that, to me, is like, that is a device I want to use. And I wouldn't have been able to do that as easily with my finger. Like, I was able to draw little boxes, write in the boxes what I wanted to be in there, and I sent it to them, and then everybody knew what I liked.
Yeah, that's really nice.
But that type of stuff really works for me, and it makes the iPad Pro, for me, more pro. Like a keyboard does for somebody like you and Jason, the pencil does for me. Because it just matches the way that I like to work. One thing that I tried out, Federico, that I thought was pretty interesting was I downloaded SwiftKey.
Mm-hmm.
And I was using their swipe keyboard.
No.
Right? So I had the pencil in my hand and I was just... Because if I'm holding the pencil like I was doing something, I was writing, I was drawing, I was taking some notes... And I got a text message, and the pencil's already in my hand. So I found myself doing this, just tapping out a quick reply, right? Just tap out, send. And then I thought, SwiftKey would be way easier for this, because you just swipe it out like you're drawing. And it was fantastic. But the problem is, then I have a third-party keyboard on iOS, which is hell, which is just hell.
It's terrible.
So it's like, I would really like to be able to do this, Apple. You just need to get your stuff together about this one as well.
Oh, they should have like a feature that when you're using the pencil and you get a text field, instead of showing the keyboard, they show you like a little text area and you can handwrite and it becomes text.
Yeah, I would like that.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, this makes sense to me. Like, this year, I have been upset with a lot of things that Apple have done. They've had some good. They've had some really good stuff, but they've had some real misses in places. Some of their 1.0 stuff has been pretty shaky. Like, we had a lot of bad stuff to say about the Apple TV, for example.
Yeah.
I have nothing. The watch, yeah, the watch had a bunch of things that were kind of weird. This product, to me, is the best. It is the best singular 1.0 product that Apple have released this year. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And the things that we thought were weird about it really make sense. Like, the way that you primarily charge this thing is super weird. It is awkward. You have this pencil sticking out. It doesn't sit flush with the iPad like when you connect it. But when you're using this device, that 15-second charge, 30 minutes of use is genius.
Exactly. But let me ask you this, because I saw this comment. So in theory, it looks weird, right?
Uh-huh.
But what would have been a better solution?
There isn't one. This is the best solution. This is genius, because you're using the thing and it's like, oh no, the battery's dying. Let me just plug it in for 15 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that is not an issue. And then if you want to charge it for longer, you have a specific reason you want to charge it to full. Like, you could do a couple of things like what I've done. I was watching a movie. I was going to watch a video on my iPad. So I was like, oh, so the iPad's just going to be doing nothing for a bit. The pencil's going to do nothing for a bit. Let me plug it in for half an hour. And then it was like 80% battery. So that's great because I'm not touching it anyway. I mean, yeah, it's not elegant, but it's just doing its thing. But if I needed to, I've got an adapter in the box. I can just plug it in with the adapter. Like, it is inelegant, but it is. I prefer this to having to plug a lightning port into this every time, like a lightning connector into this every time I want to charge. Like if it had a female connector and I had to plug it in, that would be frustrating to me if I had to do that every time.
It may be inelegant, but it's practical and it works anywhere. So,
it's a trade-off, but it is a practical one. It is a crazy sensible way of charging this thing. It makes sense to me as a thing to do. Because when pens run out of ink, you have to fill them. And filling a fountain pen is messy. And it is a to-do. You know, you have to get the bottle of ink, you have to get some tissue paper to dry up, you know, and to blot out. You need some blotting paper so you can get the ink flowing again. When you want to sharpen a pencil, like a real pencil, you have to make a mess, right? And it's inelegant. You're sticking this thing into a thing and you're sharpening it with a blade. The parallel of this makes perfect sense to me. It is inelegant when you need to refill this thing, but it's a short action, and then you get back to work again.
Yeah. So my girlfriend asked me an interesting question the other day. So if Apple were to improve the pencil, like to improve the overall experience of using the pencil, new features, new something, okay? What do they need to do? Do they need to improve the pencil? Do they need to improve iOS? Do they need to change the iPad? And I didn't really have a single answer to that. But you are the pen guy. What do you think could be improved and how could be improved?
So I would like to see a way to store it because I am going to lose this. It is inevitable. And it's an expensive thing to lose. It's $100 to replace it. Right.
Yeah.
A couple of things I would like to see. The cap on the end that covers the lightning port is just dying to be lost. So I would like to see a retractable mechanism like a mechanical pencil. So for example, there could be a button on the side of this thing and you press it and the lightning port pops out the top. And there could be like a little trapdoor mechanism that keeps it hidden and keeps dust out of it. This exists on some pens. I would recommend that people, if they wanted to take a look at what I'm imagining here, I'm going to put two pen links in the show notes. One is called the Vanishing Point, and one is called the Lamy Dialogue 3. So I'm going to put two links in there. These are fountain pens that have mechanisms for retracting the nib, and they both deal with this in interesting ways. I would like to see something like that for the lightning port. So it is retracted in the pencil, you press a button, and it pops out. So then you're not going to lose that little cap, because that's going to be super frustrating when I eventually lose that. I would like to see a clip on this or a flat edge so it doesn't roll away by design, rather than just by, we've designed this thing and then put weights in it. Like, that was the way that they fixed the problem. Rather than, in my opinion, rather than designing it from ground up that way. They wanted a cylindrical thing, which is very beautiful, but I would like to see a clip on this, or just something that stops it from rolling away. I think for some people, it's not very grippy. I think it's fine, but it would maybe be nice if, and Apple could do this elegantly, to have a rubberized grip, or they could make this thing out of aluminium. And they could have it knurled. And if you don't know what knurling is, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to a pen that Apple sell in their retail stores. Mm-hmm. So they worked with a company called Retro 51, one of my favorite pen making companies, to have something called the Hexamatic, which is a pen and pencil, and it has this grip on it, which is in aluminium, which is called knurling, and it's like this. They basically put like this grid in the aluminium, which gives it a grip. And I would really love to see an aluminium version of the pencil. So that's kind of what I wish for 2.0, but none of those things are desperately needed.
And all of those things are about hardware, not software.
The software is perfect. Look, all right, so what would I want? You want the obvious. I want this thing to be even more responsive. Because it's not 100% one-to-one.
No, not yet.
but it will be.
We have to assume that it'll be eventually.
Yeah.
But that requires Apple to increase the refresh rate of the iPad Pro's display again.
Yep.
So going from 240 FPS to 480, maybe. That's crazy. But that requires a major change, and basically another display technology, which I don't think could happen next year. I don't know.
No, I think we're a way away. I think what will happen is it will get incrementally better over time.
Yeah.
That's
I think
my
so.
feeling about this.
But you feel that the changes that you want to see in software, besides accuracy and speed, you feel like Apple for this 1.0 kind of nailed the experience.
They did a good enough job.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it is not perfect. I am still ahead of it, right? Like when I'm writing fast, I am ahead. It is not completely keeping up with me, but it is not so far wrong that it's a problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm thrilled with this thing.
Nice. That's what I wanted to. I was really looking forward to your perspective, Myke, and I feel like I want to see more from you on this going forward. Like using the pencil as a pen. Like I assume there's going to be a whole new categories of apps coming.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean it makes sense, right? People have done this for other styling on the iPad before, and now it makes sense to have like special pencil features and apps coming now that it's built into the iPad. One final question that I have for you: if Apple were to make the pencil available on the iPad Air 3 next year, would you go back?
No, I love the iPad Pro.
Okay.
Like I love the format, because I'd already decided I wanted to stick with the iPad Pro before I got the pencil, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like for this to be really useful, like it needs to have a big screen so I have space to kind of write out in full. I don't know. Let me pick up my iPad Air here, right, and just see what it feels like.
It's gonna be fun.
I feel like I haven't got enough space to rest my hand and write on it at the same time.
True.
Like I'm resting my hand on it and I'm like halfway into the screen, where on the iPad Pro there's more space for me to like rest my hand and write with this thing, and it's more comfortable in that way. But the iPad Air feels ridiculous to me now.
Yeah, I know. I
love this thing, man. I got to say, this is the iPad Pro, and the Pencil is my favorite Apple device of the year, even including my incredible iMac that I love dearly. But the iPad Pro is something that I really love, and the Pencil just tops it off. They're a fantastic pairing, and I'm excited to see where this technology goes, and I really hope that Apple continue to advance their efforts in this realm.
Very nice.
That wraps up this week, Federico.
Yeah.
I love
Good
that.
job, Myke.
You got to talk about workflows, and I got to talk about pens.
Yeah.
How fantastic.
It's just perfect. Thank you, Michael.
If you want to catch our show notes, which have got some of the apps that we've been using, as well as some of the pen options, and if you didn't know what I meant about some of this stuff, go take a look at some of those pens and the pencils. I hope that it will kind of inform what I would like to see from this device. If you want to find those show notes, they're at relay.fm/connected/67 or in your podcast app of choice. If you want to find us online, you can head on over to macstories.net to find Federico's work, and he is at Vitici on Twitter. I am at iMyke, IMYKE. And if you want to see Steven's work, if you miss him because he's not here this week, go to 512pixels.net, and he is at ISMH on Twitter. We won't actually all be together again next week. I'm going to be away.
Yeah, you're always going around, Myke.
I know. We're a fast-moving bunch.
Yes, we are.
So I'll be back in a couple of weeks' time. But enjoy the show as always next week. Federico and Steven, I'm sure, will knock it out of the park. I love listening to this show when I'm not on it. It's actually, we make a good podcast, Federico. Did you know that?
I believe we do, Myke.
Some have been known to say that it's the world's greatest. We'll be back next time. Thanks so much to our sponsors this week, Squarespace, Fracture, and Braintree. Until then, say goodbye, Federico.
Arrivederci.